Hey everybody, how's it going? So this is another sort of analytical recent film review similar to the Da 5 Bloods video, but today we're actually going to be talking about a recently released horror film that many people have been saying is very timely. Not only is it about something almost like a virus spreading, but it also sort of captures the existential dread that many people feel and how people respond to it. And that would be the Amy Seimetz film, She Dies Tomorrow.
Hi. How's the new house?
Good. Can you come over?
I can't. Are you okay?
Now, when I first saw the trailer for She Dies Tomorrow, the film looked to me to be sort of a more, not artistic, but a dreadful horror film. And when I say dreadful, I don't mean bad, I mean literally full of dread, almost in the gothic sense. And that really appealed to me. I love the colors in the film. I love the premise, which, if you don't know, She Dies Tomorrow is a film about a woman who believes that she is going to die tomorrow. And as she tries to sort of get help from other people and talk to them about her feelings, she begins to spread these feelings of existential dread to others, who then spread it to other people, so on and so forth. So that's where you sort of get this virus angle, where the fear of death is spreading and infecting people and not ruining their lives, but changing them in a sense. While watching the film, there were a couple of things that threw me off a little bit, in a good way, I will say. One, I did not expect it to be a comedy. A dark comedy, but still some funny moments, and there was a couple moments early on that I wasn't sure if I was supposed to find them funny or not, and then as the film went along, I sort of got into the groove of what was happening and got a better feeling of what the movie's tone and vibe, in a sense. I also wasn't expecting the movie to be as, I don't think slow is the right word. It was just more of a quiet film than I was expecting. I think the trailers make it seem like a much more maybe intense, mind-fucky kind of movie, when in reality it's more of capturing a feeling or a vibe or an emotion that many people feel, capturing a moment, and exploring how people respond to it, with some horrific elements here and there. And don't get me wrong, there are some sequences in this film that did really disturb and unnerve me, but I connected more with its emotions and its feelings rather than the horror or the plot. Well, I'll just say right off the bat, before I get into spoilers and really dive deep into the movie, that I really, really love this movie. It's probably in my top 5 of the year right now. And I would really, really recommend it. It's on VOD right now. I rented it for like $5. You know, I think it's a small price to pay for this movie. That is just so interesting, so well done, and really, really great at capturing what it feels like to have a panic attack, not only from your own perspective, but how it affects other people.
You expecting someone?
Hello, Jane.
You okay?
I just have this feeling I'm going to die tomorrow.
But how do you know?
I just know.
Okay, so you don't know.
Happy birthday to you.
So to sort of get into the film more, I think She Dies Tomorrow is a film that sort of paradoxically captures how existential dread, nihilism, a fear of death, you know, these anxiety-riddled feelings, how isolating they can be, how sort of how they can cut you off from other people and sort of box in your emotions, and yet how universal they are, how these feelings do catch onto other people, and how it affects them, and how you're sort of not alone in this fight, in this battle. So when the film begins, we have Amy, who wakes up and wanders aimlessly to her newly bought home and spends the day listening to the same classical piece. I believe it's a Beethoven song, it's in the trailer. And we sort of see her thought process, where she's going outside and like feeling the ground, she's trying to drink water, she's lying on the floor. You know, it's a very quiet, almost meditative sequence, until she eventually does call her friend Jane, and tries to get Jane to come over, talk her through what's happening, be there for her. But she's so self-involved in her own life that rather than listen to Amy's problems, Jane begins to talk about her own problems and sort of explaining in a very roundabout, ranty sort of way why she can't be there for Amy at that moment. Until eventually later on in the night she does show up, and Amy begins to describe these feelings she's had of, well, she believes that she's going to die tomorrow. And it's not, I might die tomorrow, it is a definitive, I am dying tomorrow. It is happening, you cannot convince me otherwise. And so Amy keeps having these feelings of wanting to be useful, right? When she dies, she wants to be turned into a leather coat, thinking she wants her skin to be turned into a leather coat. She thinks that will be useful to somebody. She thinks about how, trees and wood and the grass and the land sort of are useful in all parts of their life, either in death, like the wooden floor she walks on, or in life, like the plants who give oxygen to us. We sort of see her thought process as she's working through what's happening, but Jane is very dismissive of this, mainly because Amy has sort of fallen off the wagon. She started drinking again and it's heavily implied she's trying to be sober, or really told to us later on. But Jane eventually leaves, deciding Amy cannot be helped or can't do anything for her. But then once Jane returns home, that same feeling that she's going to die tomorrow takes hold. She's been infected with it. And then her response to it is to go to her brother and sister-in-law's house and try to talk to them about her feelings and try to connect with somebody and explain herself to them. From there, the feelings spread further and further. Ultimately, the film becomes sort of an exploration of how people respond to these feelings, how people respond to the fear of death, the idea that they're going to die, the existential dread that creeps into the forefront of our minds sometimes. And in this case, well, Amy responds by sort of throwing caution to the wind. She drinks again, she drives out in the middle of the desert, starts riding dune buggies around, trying to live life to the fullest or find some sort of usefulness or meaning in her last moments. Jane desperately tries to connect to people, desperately tries to explain herself to other people, spends a lot of time talking to others and trying to figure out what's happening, trying to work through it and process it. Jane's brother Jason and his wife Susan also catch the virus, and their response is to respond with anger. They believe that Jane is the one that gave the feeling to them, and so their goal now is to try and kill her. But they are unsuccessful, and Jane is more just mortally wounded. I guess she's bleeding out. But they then sort of try to find comfort in each other and in their daughter, who is also freaking out about this feeling, who they also spread to her. And then also over at Jason and Susan's house are Tilly and Brian, a couple who, rather than try to find comfort in each other, they decide to do things they should have done a long time ago. Brian sort of cuts the life support from his father, who is sort of on his last legs, while Tilly responds by breaking up their relationship, which she says was sort of on the rocks for a long time and was going nowhere and really should have happened sooner. There are also these other side characters that aren't focused on as much, but I think still play a part in this film. Jane, after visiting Jason and Susan, decides to visit a doctor, and she spreads the feeling to the doctor, who his response is to immediately leave and go find his wife and be with her. While at the same time, the next day, Jane goes to see her neighbors, who are these two women, and they, while, worried about dying, try to use their last moments on Earth to reconnect with it, to appreciate the life they've lived and the things they're going to miss once they're gone. Taking a more mellow response, probably the most mellow response out of anybody in the film. Amy also affects the dune buggy driver, who tries to sleep with her and then for every reason realizes that he can't. And it would also be a huge oversight on my part to not mention Craig, Amy's boyfriend, who we see at the beginning of the film and who sort of starts the spread by spreading it to her. And the beginning of the film is him reacting with anger, most likely to Amy not fully understanding what he's saying or what he's going through. And when Amy is driving out in the desert, she goes back to sort of the house they were staying at, and finds him dead, where he is covered in blood. Not quite sure how he died, but he is very much dead. But you know, he uses his last moments processing it, but still trying to be with her and try to explain it to her before she sort of gives up on trying to understand, or something happens. I'm not 100% certain. What I gathered from these different characters and what they're going through is the film looks at how everybody responds differently to the fear of death, yet there are elements that are common among all of them, or really one element specifically, and that would be the attempt to connect with other people. This crushing anxiety that they all feel towards the fear of death causes them all to do things they wouldn't normally do, to be more outgoing, to pursue certain people, to be more open, to sort of, you know, appreciate what's around them. But in every single instance, each person is trying to connect with someone or something else. And I feel like in this way, the film captures the hopelessly isolating feeling of an existential panic attack, where you're sort of stuck in your head, right? Where the film is shot mostly indoors, tight spaces, a lot of shots are seemingly shot from other people's POV, where it feels like you're being watched, it feels like you're being looked. Again, that sense of dread, that sense of something is coming for you, almost in an It Follows way, but maybe not as obvious. There are also a lot of shots of like cells and the inner body and the bloodstream, again capturing that virus connection, but also showing or further illustrating the isolating, insular feelings that everyone's having. Their sort of self-absorbed reactions to this. You know, it's very claustrophobic, it's very insular. There's also the sequences where people first begin to feel this existential dread. And these moments are truly unsettling and unnerving, where characters follow a bright, flashing lights as distant voices sort of fade in and out of the background, almost calling them. It's almost as like they're seeing, you know, the last lights of their life before death, and the dead are calling to them as they stare blankly into the camera as this sort of unnerving music plays. But the comedy element of the film, which I mentioned earlier, comes in these very unnerving moments as well, because while everybody has this unnerving response to the existential dread, they have these unnerving scenes, the next shot that follows each and every time is one where we see an objective reality. We no longer see and feel what the characters are feeling, we see how they appear on the outside to anybody not experiencing what they are currently experiencing. And they always look goofy, stupid, distant, self-absorbed, just, you know, completely off in their own worlds, right? And the film at once captures not only the terror of the fear of death creeping into your mind and taking over your life in that moment, but also how kind of ridiculous and laughable it is, especially how it is viewed in hindsight or outside of the current situation, you know? And I think it's very telling that the final scene of the film takes place outdoors, where Amy wakes up and it is the day she's supposed to die. Before that, we see everybody else experiencing their last day, essentially, and they're all sort of making peace with death in their own ways, making their last connections, having their final moments. And Amy awakes as the sun rises and is repeating to herself, "It's okay, I'm okay," until eventually she starts repeating it to herself, and she begins to say, "I'm not okay." It starts mixing in with "I'm okay." So if I'm to recreate it, she says, "I'm okay, I'm not okay, I'm not okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm not okay," like that, until she eventually sort of quiets down, takes a deep breath, and sort of accepts that connection, that dichotomy of feelings, where I read it as her accepting that it's okay for her to not be okay. And then the final shot of the film is looking out at the expanse of the desert she's in, looking at the rocks, the vegetation, the rising sun, of a new day and sort of seeing the larger picture of the world, right? Escaping these insular feelings, escaping the isolating, claustrophobic indoors, but counterbalancing that with this outdoors exterior shot, right? This moment of maybe not freedom, but the beginning of a new day, right? Where this moment has passed, this attack has gone, and it's time to start to heal. It's time to start to move on, in a sense. She Dies Tomorrow explores how these self-absorbing feelings of anxiety, of existential dread, these panic attacks affect the people around us. Where this feeling of dread, this feeling and like realization of your own mortality is not the only thing that is spread. When we become lost in our own worlds, when we become consumed by these emotions, where we focus on insignificant problems, not just the fear of death, but also our own problems, right? Our own, oh, this person doesn't like me, oh, I have to go to work, oh, I have to blah, 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 right? All of these weird social anxieties that affect us. We begin to lose touch with the people around us. And so I always go back to the opening scene, or the scene with Jane and Amy. Amy is desperately trying to reach out, right? This feeling is creeping in on her. It's affected and changed her whole day. She just needs to vent. She needs to talk to somebody about these feelings. And Jane, rather than listening to her, rather than giving her the space to express herself and to validate these, well, crazy sounding feelings and emotions, Jane brushes them off. Jane instead talks about herself, her own problems, and makes it about her, in a sense. Rather than connecting about having similar feelings, she brushes Amy's off and goes off on her own tangent. And I think therein lies the real virus of the film, right? Amy may be the one spreading the fear of death, but Jane is the one that failed to provide the cure. By the end of the film, director and writer Amy Seimetz doesn't offer any clear answers. Instead, she has given us a thorough look at how universal these fears and anxieties are, and also how ridiculous they can be, you know, how at once the fear of death is terrifying and yet laughable, since it is so inevitable, and how we can get lost in our own little worlds, not just in existential fear, but also in our own lives, and not be there for the people that really need us when they have a mental health crisis, or have a panic attack, or have a moment. So she at once is taking these isolating feelings, these emotions, these times, and making them universal. By making this unique and deeply personal film, Amy Seimetz has shown, especially to someone like myself who does have anxiety and kind of has these crippling feelings sometimes, she sort of captures how isolating and terrifying and paralyzing these feelings can be, but she also provides a comfort, not only in capturing the ridiculousness of the objective view of these emotions and how I respond to them, but also showing how universal they are, and showing us that, you know, we're not alone in this. And I believe there's some comfort in that universality. There's some comfort in seeing that I'm not alone in feeling these feelings.